When we open our hearts, we are healed. It's a beautiful song. I've never heard it before. So I'm glad for whoever selected that. The theme for Centers of Spiritual Living Worldwide is, for this year, is a grand arising. The theme for this month is giant gentleness. And this week's subject is the other love. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Janine Burns as our guest speaker today. We will be talking about the law of divine adjustment. Dr. Burns is a native Long Islander who just bought a boat, I heard, and ordained as a New Thought minister, teacher, and counselor. She's passionate about helping other people shed their limiting beliefs and live from the realms of possibility. Dr. Janine is known as Rev, and she holds doctorate in religious studies and divinity from Emerson Theological Institute. So without further ado, if you want to find out more about her, check out her Facebook page. It's my pleasure to welcome Reverend Dr. Janine Burns.
Thank you, and good morning. Good morning to everyone at the Atlanta Center for Spiritual Living, Midtown, and everybody watching on Zoom. It's great to be with you. The Law of Divine Adjustment is the title of my talk today. It is in the structure of our DNA that we're spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. Think of DNA as divine nature always. Our divine nature always is as a spiritual being having a physical human experience. There is one ultimate loving energy that is present in all that exists. It expresses in, through, and all of creation. Call it whatever you choose: God, spirit, source, infinite intelligence, divine love, the universe. I'd like to call it creator of all that is. It was Dr. Ernest Holmes, philosopher and founder of Science of Mind, who wrote about God in his book, This Thing Called Life. And I quote, he said, "God is life, not some life, but all life. God is action, not some action, but all action. God is power, not some power, but all power. God is pure spirit filling all space, and the spirit animates our every act." This means that spirit expresses in us, through us, and as us. And as a spiritual beings, we co-create with God. Our job then is to make a declaration about our life. What do we want it to be? What do we want to do? Which of our creative talents do we want to cultivate and express? And then as we focus on our dreams and goals, we literally will be divinely guided. Whatever ideas necessary for our declaration to be made manifest will be available to us. Power flows to the focus of attention. Wherever our attention goes, power goes, energy flows. And so whatever thoughts we entertain often enough and vividly enough in our thinking, in our surface mind, eventually passes to our deeper mind, our subconscious mind. And this law of mind, which is the action of God, draws and attracts people, circumstances, and events that correspond to these subconscious thought patterns. So what we think about, we bring about. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. There's a story to demonstrate this principle, and it's a tale about little Annie Morrow Lindbergh. Only part of the story is true. And Annie Morrow Lindbergh is best known as the first woman in the United States to get a glider pilot's license. She was a prolific author, and her most popular work is entitled Gifts of the Sea. So she was born 1906. Now, one day when Annie was a little girl, her mom invited over her husband's business associate. Actually, it was his business partner, J.P. Morgan, invited him over for tea for a little visit and to meet little Annie. Now, J.P. Morgan was a famous financier. He was a banker, philanthropist, and art collector. Now, if you'd ever seen a photo of J.P. Morgan, you saw that he had a tremendous nose. It was big, it was bulbous, and it dominated his entire countenance. And, of course, he was very sensitive about the subject. So they sat in their living room parlor, and they spoke for a while. And Mrs. Morrow noticed that Annie kept looking at Mr. Morris's large nose, and she was getting more and more anxious as she watched Annie look at the nose, and she was stressed out, concerned that Annie would say something to Mr. Morgan about his nose. So when it was time for Annie to go upstairs to bed, Mrs. Morrow was relieved. So Annie heads towards the stairs. She stops and looks back over her shoulder at the nose, takes a few more steps, and then again, she looks back. Finally, she slowly climbed the stairs. And Mrs. Morrow, with a great big sigh of relief, turned to Mr. Morgan with the teacup in her hand and said, "Would you like any cream or sugar with your nose?" Cute little story. Power flows to the focus of attention. Wherever our attention goes, energy flows. Therefore, it is of the utmost importance to monitor our thinking and keep it positive. Now, this can be really difficult to do if we get caught up in thoughts of fear and doubt and uncertainty. And that thinking, it can literally be debilitating. The important thing to remember is that we can't control what thoughts come into our mind, but we can control if they stay there. There's a Chinese proverb that says, you can't keep the birds from flying over your head, but you can keep them from making a nest in your hair. So we can control the thoughts that come into our mind, but we can control if they stay there. So a really good suggestion is to make a list of things to think about instead. 10 things to think about instead. Because when you're suddenly become aware that you're thinking negative, it's hard to shift your thought if you're a newbie at changing your thinking. But if you have a list of things to think about instead, it can be very helpful to shift your thoughts when you do catch yourself being negative. We must be in charge of our thinking, because the power within, the divine excellence within, your authentic nature awaits us making a declaration. And we can make a declaration about whatever we want to experience in life. And we can say yes. We can say yes to peace, yes to health, yes to prosperity and joy. And the universe, the creator of all that is, immediately will flood us with all the divine ideas necessary, all the divine ideas we would require to be or have that experience. Suddenly there's synchronicity everywhere we turn, and we find ourselves at the right place at the right time, surrounded by fortuitous circumstances. So I encourage you to ask yourself, what declarations have you made for your life regarding your dreams and goals? And you don't have to just make one, because there are so many ways to express our divine nature. And the power within us waits that declaration. And when we make a declaration and we say yes to life, then it floods us with everything we need to be and experience that. So I'm reminded of the story of Jonah and the whale. And to paraphrase this story, Jonah had made a declaration. He said he was a preacher. And so when he made the declaration, said, I'm a preacher, God gave him an indication where to preach. And he said, Jonah, I want you to go down to Nineveh in Assyria. The people down there are having a bunch of problems. And I want you to tell them that all they need to do is change their minds. They need to repent, which means to change your mind, change your thinking, change your consciousness and your perceptions. Now, Jonah, he's really terrified. And he goes, he's thinking, gosh, I don't know about that. Maybe I'll do that later, not right now. And, I really don't like hanging with those Assyrians. I'm out of here. I'm just going to hang out in Joppa. I'm going to kick back and see what life brings to me. Now, don't we all know people who do that? They just kind of hang out and see what life brings them. And then whatever life brings, they're not really satisfied because they're not participating in the now moment and living fully. They might say, oh, life's a drag, or maybe they're just so blasé because they've not committed to expressing their divine nature, and they've not made a spiritual declaration of what they want their life to be. So Jonah, he goes down to Joppa, he's hanging out there, but he's really not too happy. He was actually pretty discontent because there was nothing happening. So a ship comes along and it's going to Tarsus. And Jonah thinks, hey, I like boats. I'll go for a boat ride. So he gets on the ship. Again, think about it. How many people just do that? They hang out, just going here and there, but never really committing to following their dreams. They don't commit to their goals or their talents. And beyond that, they never commit to revealing their divine nature. So Jonah's out on the boat, and all of a sudden, a big storm whips up. Now, the captain of the ship was a very clever guy. He went up to everybody on the boat and asked them, why are you there? What's going on with you? What's your declaration? Everybody said they were going somewhere. They belonged somewhere. They were going someplace. That they had their dreams and goals. Then he gets to Jonah. Jonah, where are you going? What you doing? And Jonah confessed, saying, I'm running away from God. So the captain of the ship, being the very bright guy that he was, he had a plan. His plan was to pick up Jonah and throw him overboard, which is what he did. And so there's Jonah just floating around in the ocean. And all of a sudden, this big old fish, and we figure it was a whale, this big old fish comes along and swallows him up. And that got Jonah's attention. And so Jonah then was in the belly of this whale for 3 whole days and 3 whole nights. Now, have you ever had a belly of a whale experience where you've just been wandering through your life and everything's good, but then suddenly your job ends or a relationship ends, or maybe you get some kind of an illness, or there's an accident, or there's someone you know and love, something's up, and you think, I got to figure this out. I have to strategize. I have to manipulate. I have to do something. And you want to take some kind of action and do something. You're at your wit's end, stressed out, feeling exhausted. And you feel like you've been swallowed up by the circumstances of your life, and you feel shut down. You're in the belly of the whale, so to speak, feeling as though you're being tossed around by life. And when you are in the belly of the whale, there is nothing you can do, nothing except turn to that one place where all solution lies, and that is to the presence and power of God within. And that's what Jonah did. He turned to God within and he said, and I quote from the New Revised Standard Version of the Old Testament, I have been cast out of your presence and your sight, yet I will look again towards your holy temple. So once Jonah found himself in the whale's belly, he starts to call on God. And the minute he did so, the moment that he consciously connected with the amazing energy, presence, and power of God, he said, okay, God, I'm going to get on with my life. I'm going to do what I said I would do. I'm going to live up to my commitments. I'm going to live up to my declarations. And I am willing to do the spiritual work necessary to reveal my divinity. What happened? Well, that big old whale went up to the shore and just spit him out. And so just like Jonah, if we should find ourselves in great difficulty, we too can consciously connect to the divine within using the law of divine adjustment. The law of divine adjustment is our spiritual reset button. And when we reset something, we move it back to its original space. The original space is our spiritual center, our divine excellence, our authentic nature. It's the amazing energy, presence, and power of God that expresses in and through all of life. And so regardless of what the situation, no matter how dire the circumstances seem, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical, the law of divine adjustment will see us through, because that law will regulate, balance, bring order and harmony to every aspect of our life and in circumstances. The law of divine adjustment works immediately as you decree it. There's a great Bible quote in Isaiah 43, and it says, do not remember the former things or ponder the things of the past. Listen carefully. I'm about to do a new thing, and now it's going to spring forth. And if you read a little further, it says, I will even put a road in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. the creator of all that is, can do anything. And so now is the time. Today is the day is to press our spiritual reset button and decree and affirm the law of divine adjustment is at work in my life and affairs, bringing all into divine order, harmony, wholeness, and love. The law of divine adjustment is at work in my life and affairs, bringing all into divine order, harmony, wholeness, and love. This is a very powerful statement of truth, and it brings our consciousness back into alignment with the creator of all that is. And through the law of divine adjustment, we experience ease and grace in our life and affairs. Our life can even be completely transformed. We can experience peace and joy and ease, my favorite word, ease and comfort, success and prosperity and love and wholeness, and everything not in alignment with this divine excellence will shift. Everything not in alignment with peace and power and joy and freedom and ease and wholeness, anything that contradicts our good will move out of our lives. Do you know that Ernest Holmes affirmation? It's in Living the Science of Mind, page 339. Good and more good is mine, and ever increasing good is mine. There is no limit to the good which is mine. Everywhere I go, I see this good, I feel this good, and I experience it. It crowds itself against me, flows through me, expresses itself in me, and multiplies itself around me now. Isn't that a great affirmation? So when we press our spiritual reset button, we automatically surrender and release and let go and let God. And this doesn't mean that we're giving up or giving in. It doesn't mean that we're weak, and it doesn't mean that we're lost or that we're a loser. It means that we surrender the stressing and the straining and striving to figure things out and make them happen. We cease desperately seeking answers. Instead, we declare that everything is in perfect order, harmony, and balance, and is working out for the highest best of all concerned, and we stick to it. Now, I often call forth the law of divine adjustment. Often, actually, seemingly miraculous things will occur. One time I had a bad injury to my foot. I actually broke my heel, and I wasn't allowed to put my foot on the ground for 11 and a half weeks. It was very difficult. So that day I came home from the hospital. I was so hungry, and I tried to get myself something to eat, but it was literally impossible to stand on one foot and keep my balance. And I needed to be concerned that I didn't put my other foot on the ground. So I was getting more and more hungry and more frustrated and aggravated and exhausted. Finally, I was at my wit's end, and I suddenly remembered to remember, which so much of this oneness teaching is about, remembering to remember. And I remembered this thing called the law of divine adjustment. And I said out loud over and over with great feeling, the law of divine adjustment moves through my life and affairs, bringing all in divine order, harmony, wholeness, and love. Now, feeling is very important when you work with your declarations, because feeling is the fuel that propels thoughts into manifestation. So I said this declaration over and over and over, 10 minutes with great fervor. And I even began singing it. So a little while later, my phone rings. I pick it up, and the voice on the other end says, "Hey, Rev, you just popped into my mind. Are you hungry? I just barbecued a turkey." The law of divine adjustment had worked immediately. I popped into that guy's mind, and he decided to share his food. And there were so many remarkable ways that the law of divine adjustment worked. Events shifted. People showed up to assist me. I had contractual obligations, which you can't break those. And people helped me with those and my commitments. And these events were filled with coincidences, divine coincidence, divine synchronicity, all brought forth through the law of divine adjustment. And so, students of truth, I call upon you to actively bring forth the energy and power of the creator of all that is, and your divine excellence by pushing your spiritual reset button and making your declaration. The law of divine adjustment now moves through my life and affairs, bringing all into divine order, harmony, and wholeness. You don't have to wait. until circumstances are different. You can make this declaration right now and make it often. And then you can just watch as the amazing power moves through every aspect of your life and affairs. In fact, bringing all into order, harmony, wholeness, and love. So I'd like to end with a declaration. God's wisdom guides me. God's love protects me. God's substance supports me. God's light renews me. The law of divine adjustment now moves through my life and affairs, bringing all into a divine order, harmony, wholeness, and love. And so begins the lesson.